Welcome to Communication, Connection, Community, the Podcaster's Podcast. This podcast takes a deep dive into modern-day communication strategies in the podcasting space. We chat with interesting people who make the podcasting and speaking spaces exciting and vibrant. We also dive into the podcasting community with news, updates, latest trends and topics from this ever-evolving space. So strap in. It's going to be one amazing ride. Let's dive into today's episode. And today we're continuing our conversation about myths, misconceptions, and misinformation when it comes to podcasting. And sometimes the reason why that comes into play, first off, is because we approach the podcasting space with the thought that we're going to make money from it, which is the wrong intention. But that's what we want to talk about today, is your intention when it comes to podcasting. What is the purpose? Why is it that you want to have a podcast? And quite frankly, at Podcast Solutions Made Simple, it's one of the first things that we talk about before we start working with a client is, what's the purpose of the show? What's the reason? Is it to promote your business? Is it because you want to bring about some information about a social project or something that you're passionate about? What is your why? And I know we hear that a lot in business, and it's the same with podcasting, except maybe a little bit different, because really have to focus in on the why. Otherwise, if you don't, or if you haven't done any of this deep dive homework yourself yet, for the reason as to why you're in business to begin with, it'll be hard to get your podcast off the ground. It won't be impossible, but you really need to know why you're going in with a podcast. And what quite often happens is, when we're going to workshops and seminars that are being led by people who are running business development organizations, really what they're giving you is a broad spectrum, or in some cases, they're giving you their why. They're giving you their reason why they started a podcast. They're giving you their goals. They're giving you the outcomes they hope to get from the podcast that they've created. That's not necessarily the same for you. So you really have to dive deep here and figure out the why. The why will lead you to many other things related to your show. It'll lead to many other aspects of your business. And by the way, the reason why you start your show first off might change. So if you come up with the why, or you know your why already for wanting to start a podcast, you start that podcast a year from now, it might be completely different, because your goals might shift. Your business might shift in a direction that you didn't expect. During COVID-19, for example, a lot of people had to shift their businesses, which I'll almost guarantee you they didn't expect to have happen, but they did. So therefore, for all those people who were podcasting during the pandemic and before, they had to shift. They had to, look at things differently. All right. So it has to begin with the why. Okay, it has to begin with the why, and it can be a surface why, but the deeper the why, the better your success. I believe, and in my experience in working with a number of clients, helping them launch their shows, what you're going to get out of it. All right, so start with why. I know it sounds like Simon Sinek, but it's true. Begin with the why in mind. You really have to have that in your mind. So for me, when I was starting my Speaking of Speaking podcast, it was a podcast all about helping people become better communicators and better leaders in their community, but also on stage when they're putting their best face out there, so to speak. So it started out about being this platform where people could get information, and then if they really wanted to do a deeper dive with me, then they could do that. So that was my why. A lot of people struggling with stage fright, speaking anxiety, not knowing how to deliver a presentation and not getting the results that they wanted from that. So I wanted to help people in that space. So that was my why. And then the why got deeper because we started talking about communication strategies. We started talking about, ironically enough, we started talking about digital marketing. We started talking about podcasting. We started talking about, 3 words, for example, in business, or 3 words rather that are killing your business. So we brought in a number of different ideas, and we still do with that podcast because the why is still there and the why has evolved. It's now about communication strategies in the thought leadership world, in the coaching world, in the speaking world. The general reason why we started was to give some information about where to stand on stage, how to give a presentation. Here's the signature talk solution. Here are 3 words that you shouldn't say when you're delivering your elevator speech. All of those things were within the first, I would say 20, maybe 25 episodes. But after that, it started to evolve, and it's still evolving. All right. So let's break it down. What's your why? If you get on a call with me, I'm going to ask you that. All right. So if after today you're thinking, I'm going to call Carl, I want to meet with him and find out more about what it is that his company does. If you don't know the answer to why, it's going to be very hard for us to help you, which means it'll be very hard to move forward. All right. So we really need to know the why. Why is it that you want a podcast? What is it about that podcast that has you going, it's time, I need one? I can tell you why I think you should have a podcast, but you need to know that why. All right. So number 1 is why. Number 2, again, if you're getting on a call with me, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to say, what's your goal? What is it you hope to get from this podcast? What's your goal? Do you want to get some clients from it? Is it to educate people? Is it a little bit of both? Do you want to bring in other thought leaders to have a conversation with them and have them help you elevate what it is that you do? For some people, they're not clear on their goal either, because they just think, I need a podcast, I'm going to interview a bunch of guests, and that'll be that, and it'll make me successful, and I'll be seen as an expert. The end. No, there's a strategy to it. That's why we begin with the why, okay? Then we move on to what's the goal of the show? What do you want to get from that? Because from there, we can identify some things together that will be part of your launch strategy to begin with, but it'll also be part of your overall marketing strategy. So not just in the organic space, but in the deeper dive marketing that we would help you with. All right. So really think about that. Think about, what's my goal? What do I want to get from this podcast? Is it to be seen as the expert? Is it to get clients? Is it to boost my sales? Is it to, what is it? What's the goal from the show? And again, I could tell you, I can give you some strategies, and I can also share with you what I think your podcast or any podcast should be, but that's not necessarily going to identify what your ultimate goal is. All right. So why? What's your goal? And then what's the outcome you want? Right. And I know you're thinking, well, goal and outcome, they're the same, aren't they? They can be, but they can be quite different. If your goal is to educate your prospects and get in front of more of your prospects, what do you want that outcome to be? Do you want them to be going to your website? Do you want them to sign up for an event? Do you want them to tap into a free book, an ebook, or maybe a book that you've just published? So the why, or the outcome rather, is something that you have to think about as well. So the goal is one thing. What's the outcome? A lot of people now will leverage their podcast as not just a marketing platform, but a lead magnet. They'll say, here's my podcast, here's some information, and go to my website, get the free download. And by the way, while you're there, I've got this event coming up if you want to do a deeper dive or sign up for that. But that's the outcome you want. If you want people to come to you, see you as the expert, you need to know what you want that outcome to be, which means you need to drive the bus, as I like to say, through your whole conversation every time you're cranking out a podcast episode. And this is where a lot of podcasters fall short. They fall short with the why. Yes. They don't necessarily know their goal, but then they don't know what the outcome should be. I have heard so many podcasts, when you get to the end, it's, thanks so much, we'll see you next week. Well, is that getting you the outcome, your desired outcome from that episode, from the show in general? If you don't give people the roadmap, a detailed roadmap of where you want them to go with this, you won't achieve that outcome. It's sort of like if I gave you directions to my house, but didn't give you the last 2 or 3 directions that actually brought you here. If I just let you try and figure it out on your own, you're probably not going to do that, which means you'll probably not get to my house, which means you'll probably not meet me at my house. And if we did that every single week in a podcast episode, and I didn't give you a clear outcome, I didn't give you the next step, I didn't give you the call to action, guess what? You wouldn't be called to action, right? You wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't sign up for something. And by the way, simply just saying, go to my website, it's all there. That's an easy way out. What you want to do is have a detailed solution for people or a roadmap that gets them to where they need to be. So you could say something like, all the information is on my website. That information, by the way, is in the show notes. Also in the show notes, if you go over there right now, is a list to the next event that I'm hosting, which is coming up November the 16th. But I'm giving you the detailed information. I'm telling you where it is. I'm going to post those links in the show notes. I'm going to do all of that because the outcome I want is I want you to come and join me on this journey. If I don't give you that information, regardless of what it is, you won't do it. And this is where, when individuals are hosting webinars and saying, you should have a podcast, here's the why behind it, they're not giving you this detail. They're not sharing with you, you need to know your why. They're not saying, what's the goal? They're not saying, well, what's the desired outcome you want for the entire show? What is it you want to do with this? They're not saying that. They're saying, you can do it for free. Here's some information. You can set up here. You can do this. And by the way, it works for me. You should do it too. That's generally the information that's going out there. This is a personalized journey because the journey you're going to take your prospects through, and maybe even your existing clients, will be different from the other person who's maybe viewed as your competitor. I hope this has been helpful. If you have a question, drop me an email. Go to askcarl@carlspeaks.ca. You can also go over to the show notes, by the way, where there's the link to our website. That is there. And thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to our producer and production lead, Dom Carrillo, our music guru, Nathan Simon, and the person who works the arms, all of our arms, actually, my trusty assistant, Stephanie Gafour. If you like what you heard today, leave us a comment and a review, and be sure to share it with your friends. If you don't like what you heard, please share it with your enemies. Oh, and if you have a suggestion of someone who you think would make an amazing guest on the show, let us know about it. Drop us an email, askcarl@carlspeaks.ca. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You'll find all those links in the show notes. And if you're ready to take the plunge and join the over 3 million people who have said yes to podcasting, let's have a conversation. We'll show you the simplest way to get into the podcasting space because, after all, we're podcast solutions made simple. We'll catch you next time.